All right, let's kick this off. Crude webinar, first of 2025. I'm Chris Noonan with East Daily. I'd like to bring in my colleagues, Gage and Christy. Thanks for joining us.
Well, hello, everyone.
Thanks for having us today, Chris.
Yeah, so Gage and Christy cover the crude markets for us, and we're here to talk about our production that we're seeing. So, Gage, I'm going to turn it over to you first to kick us off with what we're seeing by basin for production increases or decreases.
Okay, so yeah, as you kind of mentioned earlier, Chris and I will be going through East Daily's average 2025 North American crude oil production growth forecast and really highlighting where these volumes are coming from and also where they're going to go. So starting off, we're forecasting 49,000 barrels a day of growth in the Bakken and 4,000 barrels a day of growth from the Powder River Basin. I'm also highlighting Patoka and later on Cushing here as something that we can discuss later. But kind of in the rest of the Rockies and moving out west, we're seeing a decline of 17,000 a day in the DJ, accompanied by some waxy growth out of the Uinta.
All right, there's Cushing, and now what everybody's waiting for, what are we looking, what are we seeing in the Permian?
Yeah, so this is definitely where things get a little bit more interesting and really what's going on in Texas. So East Daily's forecasting average growth of 363,000 barrels a day in the Permian and a decline of 40,000 barrels a day in the Eagle Ford.
Hold on, Gage. Refracking. It's a big question. We're still seeing minus 40 with the refracking?
We are, and it's something that we're monitoring, we're aware of it, but we're not really here to discuss that today. We're here to discuss infrastructure. So finally, with the rest of the US, we have a little bit of production out of the Architects, and then we're highlighting the Gulf Coast and Louisiana markets as well.
All right, Gage, what does that give us for added production?
Well, rather than looking at it from an entire US standpoint, we're now kind of having to include Canada as well and get that full North American picture. So including Canada, we're getting 230,000 a day out of there and really trying to figure out how those barrels are going to impact the US market, how they're going to move through the US market, or are they not? So including Canada with the US, we're getting to 606,000 barrels a day of growth.
All right. Well, thanks, Gage. That gives us a base number with the basins. And now I want to start from north and move south. So I'm going to look, Christy, I'm going to bring you back in to talk about the 230 growth we see in Canada. And then let's overlay some infrastructure and talk about that, where these barrels are going.
Alrighty. Well, to start with, I just wanted to mention that Canada has immense oil reserves, especially when you're looking at the oil sands production. So basically what you're seeing here with the 230,000 barrel of growth is Canada finally got some egress. For years and years and years, Canada has had absolutely no excess capacity, no egress. Even when you look back to 2018, the Canadian government put a curtailment on crude oil growth due to the oversupply and the resulting blowout of the WCS benchmark price. So specifically what happened is TMX, the Trans-American Pipeline Twin, came online in May of 2024, adding 590,000 barrels of additional capacity to Western Canadian production. Throughout 2024, we saw TMX most likely get up to around between 470,000 to 500,000 barrels a day. 470,000 barrels are the commitments, 80% utilization on TMX. Now, currently today, you see a 500,000 barrel limit of capacity at TMX due to a bottleneck with the vessels out of the Westridge Marine terminal. They're not able to transport at night. TMX is working on it and are expecting to resolve that bottleneck by May of this year. So we are anticipating that TMX will probably be moving anywhere from 500 to 530,000 barrels a day. So you see the 200 go to TMX, and then you have that extra 30,000 barrels a day. That 30,000 barrels a day, I look at as more of a swing barrel. It could possibly go to TMX. It could also go down Enbridge Mainline all the way to Patoka. Now, keep in mind that Enbridge Mainline is a 3.2 million barrel a day pipeline. It's essentially at capacity. It's over 90% utilized. If you look at, if Enbridge Mainline was 98% utilized, they would still have 64,000 barrels of capacity available just due to the enormity of that pipeline. So that 30,000 barrels really could swing either direction. We think it will depend on TMX lifting the congestion right now, or lifting the bottleneck, possible congestion in the bay on the western side of Canada, and ultimately the demand pull of the export barrel. What are the prices going to look like on Western Canada compared to the Gulf Coast? Additionally, you may see that 30,000 barrels vacillate from month to month.
Thanks, Christy. All right, so continuing our journey south, let's head to the Bakken. One thing I do want to mention, Gage, I'll bring you back in here. One thing I do want to mention for everybody on here is when you look at a Bakken growth and then Bakken flows, volumes out, egress, remember we're talking pipelines here, so the numbers may not add up, but it's all on pipelines. We're not talking rail, we're not talking other things. We're looking at pipeline flows. So Gage, plus 49 in the Bakken, where's that going?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a big jump from last year go to Canada, and then down kind of towards your traditional markets as well, down into Guernsey and to Patoka via DAPL. And then kind of moving through the rest of the Rockies here, we're seeing an increase to the DJ from Guernsey, as well as an additional 8,000 barrels a day moving to the Midwest, to Wood River via Platte. And I just want to highlight that it's a growth number over last year, but it's not truly a growth number. It's more of a return to normal. As TMX came online, there was some turnarounds. There were negative impacts to kind of that express Platte system where some volumes were taken away. And now with that Canadian production ramping up, and we're starting to really see that those volumes are returning to normal.
Thanks, Gage. The DJ, that's in our backyard. We are in Denver, Colorado. You are from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I know you're rooting for the DJ, and we still see it declining.
Unfortunately, we do, and with that decline in the production number, we're going to see a decline in volumes out of the basin to Cushing as well.
All right. Well, moving through Cushing now into the biggest growth story, which is the Permian. Christy, bring you back in there. Cushing's got to get some more volumes from somewhere. Obviously, let's talk through the infrastructure coming out of the Permian.
The Permian Basin. Wow. We are getting ready for another record year of production in the Permian. At East Daily, we're anticipating 5.7% of growth in the Permian. By year end 25, we anticipate the Permian will be just shy of 7 million barrels a day. So where is all that growth going to go, that 360,000 barrels? We see the lion's share of it being split up between Corpus Christi and Houston. Now, Corpus Christi, as we know, is the premier export dock today. It's the most direct, the easiest way to get a neat Permian barrel on a vessel. All of the pipes to the Permian are over 90% utilized. However, in 2025, you are seeing a 120,000 barrel a day expansion on Gray Oak Pipeline. And ultimately, we think that the barrels that are going to Corpus, the majority of those will end up at the at Enbridge's Ingleside Energy Center, their export docks. Now, on the barrels going to Houston, you're seeing an infrastructure expansion as well. Midland to Echo 2 is coming back to crude service in third quarter of 2025, adding another 200,000 barrels of capacity. We believe the majority of the barrels going to Houston will be going on Midland to Echo Enterprise Products pipelines, ultimately going to the Echo terminal and the Houston ship channel. Now, we do see more barrels going up to Cushing, replacement of those lost DJ barrels, also a good blend barrel for the heavy Canadian coming down. And we also see some barrels going on Energy Transfers, Permian Express, ultimately the Energy Transfers Nederland docks.
Christy, thanks. Good story down there. Good growth. So that's it for our production webinar growth. And I do want to ask one more question of you, because we like to have conversations internally at East Daily, and we're all watching certain things. So Gage, you first. What story are you specifically interested in watching, or watching right now, see play out?
I think ultimately is what's really going to happen with the DJ. Are we going to see that decline in production, or and that decline kind of really continue out into the rest of 25 through 26, and then the production ramps in later years, or do we see that production ramp come sooner, given some of the proposed and current M&A activity that is going on in the basin? I think from a standpoint of where we are geographically as well, I think that's a really interesting story to watch.
Yeah, well, we're all watching it here in our backyard. So thanks. Christy, same question to you. What are you watching?
Well, I'm watching two things, Chris. I can't separate it. I'm watching Canada and the Permian. Both of them have big infrastructure projects being discussed. In Canada, they have 3, and they could really keep that growth coming if they can get that barrel to market. And some of these projects may change the flow into the US of those Canadian barrels. Also in the Permian, we've got those 4 deep water export dock projects. Only one has been ultimately approved. Wolf Link is coming up right behind Spot. BMOP has Total kind of supporting it. So will one get fully approved and fully commercialized and ultimately FID'd? If one does, I believe it could have significant impacts to the current flows of crude oil, and also additional infrastructure projects to get the barrel to the docks.
All right, well, that's it on those pieces, or at least our production pieces. Thanks everybody for joining us.